Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I am happy to be here with you today. In fact, I was just about to relax for the day and finish up when I saw an announcement that came through. I've been looking forward to this. It is very exciting in the most negative of ways. We have finally gotten the text on HR 127. It is finally available to us, and I'm really upset. And you're not going to be happy to know about this, because Representative Sheila Jackson Lee has finally shown her hand that she wants to deny Americans the ability to defend their families and to defend themselves against those who would be the criminal and the criminally insane that would harm American citizens. Now, before we get into that, if you haven't been to the channel before, we do long-form political commentary, and we've been doing so for 15 years. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We speak to you on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, even taking your calls as you send us your texts telling us what you think about the issues of the day and any solutions that may exist. Because we believe in free speech. And so we hope that you will join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about everything. Now, let's get to HR 127. As I mentioned, HR 27 was a bill that was submitted by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee on January 4th. At the time, nothing was written about this other than the title of the bill. We waited 24 days. 24 days, it's an insane amount of time to receive the actual text of the bill, to understand exactly how much Representative Sheila Jackson Lee does not understand the Second Amendment and does not believe in the rights of the American citizens to protect themselves and their families. These are strong statements, and I will back them up by showing you exactly what she wrote. Now, we know that this is not something new. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee has had a history, and we've covered her for a while on this program, but she's falling in line with, of course, none other than Joe Biden, who, even before the election, had announced his plan to end gun violence in America, and his plan did not affect criminals or the criminally insane. Rather, he targeted regular American citizens and denied them their rights, like with the red flag laws, which we have gone over several times to show are being used in 17 states, including New York State, where I am, to separate families from their children, to deny people their Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, and Fifth Amendment rights because of a mere accusation. No crimes, just punishment. This is a problem, and Joe Biden supports it. In fact, Joe Biden even supports the idea of using states and localities, local government, to buy and take the possession of firearms from American citizens who have committed no crime. This is troubling. This is troubling because the Second Amendment is very clear. A well-regulated militia being necessary to secure to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It is as clear as day. You have a right, and it has gone through the Supreme Court many times. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. The Second Amendment is not about target shooting or sport shooting. The Second Amendment is there to protect you, so that you are able to protect your family, yourself, and your property against those that would take it from you. And that includes the United States government or any government that would try to impose their will against you. Now, I understand this is a very sensitive subject. There's a lot of people who are very concerned about this. And concerns can be discussed amongst civil-minded individuals who look at all of the details and all of the facts. That is not the case when we speak about Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee and the other anti-Second Amendment advocates in America they just want to take away your rights. They just want to deny you the ability to protect yourself. Not only to deny you the ability to protect yourself with a firearm, but as we have covered in this program before, to deny you the right to even have a bulletproof vest to protect yourself passively, as we have seen with New York State Bill A352. This is a troubling trend in America. And it's a trend that's been going on for quite some time, because as we have shown, Sheila Jackson Lee, she doesn't know what she's talking about. As an example, we will play this from 2019.
My bill that I've introduced dealing with the caliber weapon, I've held an AR-15 in my hand. I wish I had it. It is as heavy as 10 boxes that you might be moving. And the bullet that is utilized, a 50 caliber, these kinds of bullets, need to be licensed and do not need to be on the street.
That's right. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, a representative in Congress who is writing laws to deny American citizens their rights, has no idea what she's talking about. She said she held an AR-15. I don't believe that's true, because as a member of the United States Marine Corps, I am very aware of the exact weight of an AR-15. It doesn't even weigh 10 pounds, fully loaded. And she's talking about it weighing 10, the same as 10 packing boxes. Representative Lee, what are you packing? And she's saying that it fires a 50 caliber round. That's not an AR-15. I don't know what you're talking about. And most importantly, Representative Jackson Lee, you don't know what you're talking about, as has been stated by every credible authority on firearms in the world. In fact, we know that many women regularly use firearms in all of America and around the world. They do this as a hobby for many of them, some of them because they were in the military, many because they're hunting. Many of them are moms, they're instructors. And in fact, some of them are 9-year-old girls, like in this case.
But sometimes there's a rival that makes him dig just a little bit deeper. And for Coach Clint Upchurch, one of the most dominant three-gun shooters alive and about to leave for the Washington, D.C. area for his season-ending three-gun championship, that nemesis is a 9-year-old girl, his daughter, Anna.
That's right. Who is one of the strongest competitors to a champion marksman, a 3-firearm champion? His daughter, who happened to be 9 years old, and that was in 2012. And Representative Sheila Jackson Lee wants us to believe that the firearms we're talking about are too much. Too much for that 9-year-old, too much for us. This is a misrepresentation, a gross misrepresentation, and because it is such a gross misrepresentation, we have nothing to believe other than it is a lie. Not a misunderstanding, not a misstatement of fact. This is a direct lie, because none of it is true. But why would Representative Sheila Jackson Lee go that far? Why would she want to deny men and women, families, the ability to protect themselves? And when I'm talking about protecting themselves, I mean just like this woman, a woman who was raped as a Temple student and is an advocate for the Second Amendment. Who is she? She's Savannah Lindquist. And her story, as we can see, is that a man that she thought was her friend, raped her. And as he did so, she thought that the handgun her grandfather had bought for her 10th birthday, the handgun that was sitting in her house in Virginia, 300 miles away from her, instead of on her hip or at her bedside. The handgun Lindquist believes could have saved her life. That night in 2016 became the dynamite that blasted away Lindquist's life path, derailing her dream of being her family's first college graduate. In an instant, her views on gun rights morphed from theoretical to rooted in traumatic personal experience. If carrying firearms on campus were legal, she believes her Kel-Tec gun would have been in her apartment and she would not have been raped. I want to ask Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, what are you saying to Ms. Lindquist? What are you saying to the women who defend themselves with firearms against rapists, muggers, deranged individuals? What are you saying to fathers of children who are trying to save their families? Not long ago, there was a story in Florida of a pregnant woman, 9 months pregnant in Florida, that protected her family with an AR-15 from 2 assailants that were trying to kill them. But let's go further, because it is shocking and amazing to hear representatives say they want to destroy the Second Amendment. And please don't think that I'm exaggerating this. I'm going to show you what I mean. This is Bill H.R. 127. It has been renamed to the Sabika Sake Firearm Licensing and Registration Act. It was formerly called the Licensing of Firearms and Ammunition Possession and the Registration of Firearms, and to prohibit possession of certain munitions. Yes, that was a mouthful. So, like many of the members of Congress, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee decided to rename it, to name it after a woman, to then make it more attractive and appealing, and to hide the negative impact of this law on women, on children, families, and men across this nation. So let's go to the text. What does Bill H.R. 127, the Sabika Sake Firearm Licensing and Registration Act, actually say? And I'm going to read this with you now that it has finally, 24 days later, been revealed to the American public. Licensing of firearms and ammunition possession, registration of firearms. The Attorney General, through the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms and Explosives, often called the ATF, shall establish a system for licensing the possession of firearms or ammunition in the United States, and for the registration with the Bureau of each firearm present in the United States. Let me pause there. She has required that you will need a license for every firearm in the United States, and that you would need a license for ammunition for that firearm in the United States. This is insane. And I don't mean it's kind of sort of insane. This is absolutely insane. As we go over, and you can look at this article from the Brookings Institute, and all of the links for everything that I am describing will be in the YouTube description, so that you can see this at your leisure in full. But speaking about gun sales and unintended consequences, there are more guns than people in the United States. 400 million are in circulation. 400 million guns are in circulation for a population of 330 million people. In just the first 6 months of 2020, approximately 19 million firearms have been sold, representing more than one firearm for every 20 Americans. In fact, it's estimated that there could be as many as 165 million Americans that own a firearm, roughly 1 in 2 Americans, and each of those Americans own, on average, approximately 2 to 2.5 firearms. We know that at the end of the year, an additional 5 million Americans bought firearms, and that was after Joe Biden became elected, because the fear is real because of bills like H.R. 127. And again, just in this first paragraph, let's have a clear understanding of what we're talking about, because we would have to register 400 million firearms. This is from a government that can't count mail-in ballots. This is from a government that took 24 days to print a text. 24 days. And they're looking to have a list 400 million guns, a database that large, held in the government where? Accessible to who? For what reason? But I want to look at something entirely different. Because we know that in any given year, there are roughly, according to the CDC, there are roughly 14,414 homicides by firearms in the United States each year, on average. Now, that's out of a population of 330 million people. But instead, we want to do simple math. This, out of the 19 million new firearm owners in the United States in 2020 alone, the total number of firearm homicides amount to 0.0% of the population. Let me say that again. 0.07% of the population. That means that gun owners are 99.93% law-abiding citizens. Overwhelmingly, to a degree that is almost 100%, American citizens are not the problem when it comes to firearms. American citizens like Savannah Lind are not the problem when it comes to firearms. They use the firearms to protect themselves and their families from rape and murder and criminals. But let's go back to the text. So, being very clear here, it goes on to say that the firearm registration system, under the Bureau of Firearm Registrations, under the firearm registration system, the owner of a firearm shall transmit to the Bureau the make, model, serial number of the firearm, the identity of the owner of the firearm, the date the firearm was acquired by the owner, and where the firearm is or will be stored. Also, a notice specifying the identity of any person to whom and any period of time during which the firearm will be loaned to the person. So if anyone borrows your firearm, you have to notify the government so that they know where that gun is. If you have it, you have to tell them when did you get it, where it is, how it's being stored. And I have to ask a question. How does that make you safe? How? Just in this, assuming that somehow the gargantuan attempt of 400 million registrations were to be done by the United States government that cannot print a document in less than 24 days, assuming that we were able to do that, please let me ask you, why does the government need to know where you store that firearm in your house? How does that protect you from a criminal? How does that protect you from a rapist? How does that protect you from the insane? How? Why does the government need to know that? Why is this being said when we understand that the Second Amendment shall not be infringed? You have the right to keep and bear arms, and it shall not be infringed. And yet, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee wants to know exactly where you've put that firearm, exactly what kind of firearm it is, exactly who has access to that firearm at all times of the day. Why does she need to know that? How does that protect you? Let's go further. The deadline for providing this information is within 3 months after the effective date of this bill or at the time that you receive a firearm. So you are to do this immediately or else. And the or else we are going to get to because it is vitally important you understand how they are going to deny you your Second Amendment rights. This is a punishment. Absolutely, without equivocation, this is meant as a punishment. They are going to punish you for having the right to have a firearm. I will clarify and explain that in this text very shortly. So, we want to make sure that we understand this. The license, because she said there is a license. And we have to ask the question, what does this license do? Why do we need a license? Well, the license, except as otherwise noted, means that you must be 21 years of age. And after you apply for the license, by the way, by saying that you have to apply for a license, it means that the government can choose to deny you that license. The government has the right to pick and choose who will and who will not receive a firearm. If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't need to apply. You would just fill out the form. So this is a request. This is given your power, your right, your Second Amendment constitutional right. By this bill being accepted, you no longer have that. You have now transferred your freedom and your right to the government. And they can choose if you can have that right based on their qualifications and their decision at the time. So after applying for the license, which you may or may not receive, you're going to go through a criminal background check. No big deal. And it's going to determine whether or not you violated any of several other laws that may prevent you from having a firearm, such as taking medication to help you go to sleep or to deal with anxiety, or if you're using medical marijuana, or any number of other limiting factors. You would have to go under a psychological evaluation. You have to go in and have an evaluation, again, where is the manpower to make sure that this could happen? Where are we getting the people to conduct these psychological evaluations? Where is the money coming from to create this list, to create this database, to conduct these licenses, and to issue these applications, to process the applications, and to hold a psychological evaluation for 165 million American gun owners? It is not possible unless you don't allow 165 million Americans to have firearms, and you cut that number down severely. Then it would be manageable. The third point of getting the license, which you may be denied for, is having a training course. Now, this is the one point that I will stand by, not as a requirement of the government, but I believe for any firearm owner, you should be trained in the firearms that you have, and you should be able to use them proficiently. That's just a matter of safety and effectiveness. So I do agree with that one point. But that by no means means that I agree with anything else that Representative Sheila Jackson Lee has stated. She has a good intern to get that one thing in. The fourth item is that you will have to demonstrate that you have an insurance policy. Now, this has been floated around in 2019. It is returned, and it's in several states like New York State, where this idiotic idea that every single American who owns a firearm must own an insurance policy. Why? Why must we do that? To generate income for various businesses, and more importantly, the United States government, so that they can collect fees besides the fees that they're already collecting for the license, to be able to get more fees? To put a higher level of burden on the American citizens to prevent them from being able to have their right to a firearm? And this is something that Sheila Jackson Lee should really be sensitive about, because the people this is going to affect the most are the poorest Americans, and that tends to be, in America, minorities. She is targeting minorities. We love to hear from the Democrats. The Democrats love to tell us that they are a party that stands for minorities. They love to tell us that they are sensitive to minorities. She is targeting minorities with this bill. She is making it out of the ability of the average American, and in particular the average minority in America, to have the time to go through a criminal background check and pay the fee for that, to go through a psychological evaluation, taking time off work to get that done, to go through a training course and the cost of that training course, and to then further have an additional cost laid upon them for insurance on that license. Can you imagine? Just think, what would be the insurance to own a firearm in Chicago? in Baltimore, in Detroit. Oh, yes, those are the worst cities in the nation. In fact, they're some of the worst cities in the world. But what about the rest of the nation? What about New York City? What about LA? What about New York State? How many states do we have to go through? What happens if there's a robbery that happens, a bank robbery, just a mugging that happens? Are your insurance rates going up? And what happens when you can't afford that insurance? We're going to get to that because Sheila Jackson Lee has that punishment included in this bill. She has that deterrent. So she is trying to make you pay far more than that bill actually, than the actual firearm costs. And she wants to prevent you from being able to afford it. And she wants to target minorities as much as she wants to hit the regular American. Let's move on. Military-style weapons, which is a talking point for Democrats, even though they don't know what that means. A military style is a look. That's Hollywood. That has nothing to do with the actual effectiveness of a firearm. How it looks does not affect what it does. Somehow, Democrats that are against firearms, the progressive left, don't seem to understand that. And they don't seem to understand that what they see in a movie isn't the reality. But someone who has a, quote, military style, whatever that may mean, would, after applying for the license, would need to do a training course, an additional training course on top of the training course to get the license. So again, making it financially out of the realm of most American citizens. And this includes the training and live fire and storage of the weapon. This is a problem. I mean, we're going through this, and this is insane. Now, they do include that individuals prohibited by federal law, ex-cons wouldn't be able to have a firearm, individuals that have been hospitalized with a mental illness, a disturbance, or diagnosis, including depression, would not be able to have a firearm. That is something that's depression isn't permanent. It isn't a permanent disability. People have difficult times in their lives, but just because you may go through a difficult time in your life, you lose not only any property you have, but you would lose it in the future as well. This is a problem. I want to go on, and you can read this for yourself. Again, the link will be in there. And remember that this license is going to have to be renewed. So it's not like you get it one time and you have it for your lifetime. This is an issue that will have to go over. Every 3 years, you will have to go through this monetary expense again and again. And also the time expense. You'll have to take time off work to make the application, to get the psychological review, to go in and pay the fees for all of this again, because you own a firearm to protect your family, to protect yourself, to defend against rape. Again, I have to ask that these women, this 9-year-old, this young woman, Savannah Lindquist, a rape survivor, I don't see how this is making them safer. Let me ask you again, getting this license, and this is just a license for the firearm. We haven't even addressed the license for the firearm for ammunition, which is a separate process. Again, adding to the cost to make it financially out of the realm of the average American citizen so that they are denied the ability to have a firearm. And this gives the Democrats the ability to say, I didn't deny you your Second Amendment rights. It's still on the books. You just can't afford it. You can't afford to go through the loopholes and jump through all of our paperwork to be able to get this done. That's not my fault. You just need to make more money. By the way, they're raising your taxes so you can't have more money. This is a problem. But again, I come back to this same thing. Looking at the entirety of the idea of a license that has to be renewed every 3 years, how does this make the American citizen safe? 99.93% of Americans are law-abiding citizens. How does this make them safer? How does this prevent someone who is a criminal or criminally insane from committing a crime? This would be the same silence you're hearing is the same silence that would come from Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, a woman who does not even understand what an AR-15 is and cannot describe it. She's probably never held one in her life based on her description of it. This is a problem. But this isn't the worst of it. I'm actually going to skip through, and by the way, military-style weapons are now going to be defined by their name, not by the action of that firearm, not by its capabilities, but by the name. So if you have a Beretta AR-70, a Colt AR-15, if you have a Kalashnikov, a Uzi, a Steyr AUG, well, then you're done. You can't have it. It's a military-style weapon. Since when? Since when did military style become a name, a brand? That has nothing to do with the capabilities of the firearms, which a military style weapon, a military firearm is an automatic firearm. Automatic, not semi-automatic, automatic, which these firearms are not. But let's go further. And I'm going to skip through the rest of it. Even though there's a lot of problems in this bill, a lot of issues, and repeated levels of steps that require people to spend more and more money and giving the government more and more opportunities to say, no, you can't have that, and denying people their rights as defined by the Second Amendment. But the thing that gets me is I want to get into the penalties. And in the penalty section, we see here that whoever knowingly violates shall be fined not less than $75,000 and not more than $150,000, imprisoned not less than 15 years and no more than 25 years. Let's be clear. This is a fear tactic. You are going to be terrified. Oh my God, if I don't get my license every 3 years, if I can't afford the process to get the license every year, if I can't afford to own the gun and the bullets and all of that, then you will be fined $75,000. At least, possibly $150,000. And or you may be thrown in jail for 15 years of your life. Can you imagine that? Imagine, and I want you to think about this. This is Savannah Lindquist, again, the woman who survived a rape at Temple University, who believes that if she had had her firearm with her, she would not have been raped. I don't know her age. Let's assume she's 21. Let's assume that she's 24. I don't know. So I'm going to make, for this example, we're going to say she's a 24-year-old woman. She's just out of college. Or she's in college. In fact, she is a student in college, which means she can barely afford, she can't afford a tuition. That's why she has student loans. She may be working through college, which means she can barely afford her apartment and her food. And if not, she's probably got a job anyway, just because students need money. We know this. College students are not known for being independently wealthy. That's why we have student loan debt that's so high, because colleges cost that much. So this woman who is barely able, if we say this young woman who is in college and is barely able to afford the fact that she's going to college, she now has to come up with the money and the time to take a psychological test, to make an application, to pay the fees for that application, to buy a firearm, and then to get an entirely separate application and a separate license to be able to afford ammunition. And if in that process she failed to do any of that, then she's going to be fined $75,000. In this case, she has a firearm that was gifted to her by her grandfather that she would still need to get a license for. This is a gift that was given to her, and she would still need to go through that entire process coming up with the money for that license that the government may still deny her for. And if she doesn't do it, even though she's gotten this gift from her grandfather, and so she possesses it, she would possibly go to jail for 15 years while in college. She would have to pay $75,000 on top of her student loans because she was poor. That doesn't seem to be very fair. Or how about we understand it from another point of view? That she is depressed because she had someone who raped her. And because she was raped, she was depressed. But she wants to take care of her Second Amendment rights. She wants to protect herself from that rape in the future. And she goes through the process. She gets the money together to be able to afford the licensing programs that are there as a barrier. And she affords that and goes to the psychological exam, and they determine that in the past she was depressed. Not then, not that day, but she was depressed in the past because she had been raped. And therefore, they deny her her right to defend herself in the future from another rape. How are you helping anyone, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee? How are you helping that woman in that scenario? In the description, in the example I have just provided, how are you helping American citizens protect themselves? Oh, I understand. You mean to tell me that you expect that there will be a police officer at every corner of every block, everywhere in America, every hour of every day? Oh, that's not going to happen. You don't like the police. You want to defund the police. You want to have less police so American citizens have to rely on themselves more. But you're taking away our ability to protect ourselves. You won't even let us get bulletproof vests. You're making that illegal in some states. So I don't understand this. How is the American public made better off? And I ask you again, even with the fine, how is this affecting criminals? Where are the criminals being stopped by this? Do you think a criminal who is using a firearm and is willing to kill a human being is going to worry about the fact that they have to pay a fine of $75,000? They're not going to pay the fine. They're a criminal because they're trying to get $75,000. So they'll go to jail. They were going to go to jail anyway. They were willing to commit murder and go to jail anyway. The little kids in the gang banging crap that they do, they're not worried about fines. They're not worried about going to jail for murder. So do you think a fine of $75,000 or 15 years is going to stop them somewhere? That this is going to prevent them? The laws we have right now don't do it. Why is this additional law going to do it? There is some it's really frustrating to me that somehow we see a lot of these Democrats, these progressive in Congress and in leadership, they seem to think that if we just make another law, that suddenly the criminals and the deranged are suddenly going to realize, oh my God, they wrote another law doing the same thing that the other laws did, and now I have to listen. You just have to write enough laws. If you write the laws enough times, taking away people's rights every single time, eventually there's going to be a law that this criminal is going to look at and go, oh my God, now I see the light of day. I'm no longer going to break the law. No, they're not. That isn't what happens. That's not a reality. That isn't even a pipe dream. That's a delusion. But again, I come back to this bill, H.R. 127. What have I described to you? Reading the bill itself that tells you that a criminal will not go forward and commit a crime with a firearm, that a deranged individual will not go out and kill someone, that a terrorist, whether it's domestic or foreign, will come to America and kill American citizens. Please tell me how this stops any of them. How? The overwhelming number of all the crimes that have happened in America with a firearm are, the best estimate I have seen that I can recall is about 95% of all firearms that are used and committed in crimes are not legally owned. Stolen from someone, bought by black markets. They're not legal firearms. And so this doesn't even apply to any of those individuals. It only applies to the 99.93% of American citizens who are law-abiding. And it is there to deny them their constitutional rights. It is there to deny them their freedom. This is meant to prevent blacks, Hispanics, and women from being able to defend their lives, their families, and their property. This is a punishment. You will be punished for owning a firearm. Though they want to take the number from 165 million Americans owning a firearm and drop that down to zero. They want to prevent you from being able to own a firearm, and they don't have the balls to say it to your face. So instead, they put all of these barriers in front of you, financial and time, and give themselves options to deny you over and over again because they don't want you to have a firearm. And I have to ask the question, why? Why do they want to deny us the right to have these firearms? Why is it that they want to know where every single firearm is at all time, everywhere in your home, and how you store it? How does that protect anyone? Why do we have to have all of these problems, these financial layers, whether it's insurance, the licensing fees, the psychological tests? Why do we have to have all these loopholes to prevent the 99.93% of American citizens that are law-abiding and have never been a problem? That is a very serious and significant question. And I have to say, this doesn't protect anyone. This doesn't make anyone in America any safer. The Sabika Sake Firearm Licensing and Registration Act is not about protecting American citizens. It is not about reducing the problems with gun violence in America. This is about punishing American citizens that dare to do something that Representative Sheila Jackson Lee doesn't like because she doesn't understand it. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And people like Joe Biden just don't want you to have the ability to be able to protect yourself. That's what this is about. You may disagree with me on this, but I have shown you the facts. You have seen the documentation for yourself. And I have asked the same question, and I ask it yet one more time. How does this make you safer? How does this protect you from the criminals? How does this help a woman who's being raped? How does that stop that from happening? And why are they picking on minorities, whether by color or by gender? Why are they picking on minorities, picking on the poor, and preventing them from having the right that they themselves use every single day? They are armed. Sheila Jackson Lee has bodyguards. They have firearms. So she's willing to protect the elites while punishing the public. This is upsetting, and we should speak about this. I hope you share this video, and I mean that for people who agree with me and people who don't agree with me. And for those who think they have an answer on how this protects American citizens, please let me know. I want to see that discussion. I want to have that discussion. But Sheila Jackson Lee just wants you to be defenseless. She doesn't want a discussion. That's why she didn't show you the bill for 24 days. They don't want a discussion. They just want you to obey. And I have a great deal of problems with that. But again, if you have a different opinion, please do. I look forward to seeing the comments on this so I can respond or actually learn from it. And on every Sunday, I want you to please join us at 2:30 p.m. for our live stream discussing this and many other subjects. And if you have found this to be informative and useful, whether you agree or disagree, please like, share, and most of all, do subscribe and let this exercise of free speech grow and reach more people and get more involved. I thank you, and I hope that you have a good day.